as we have it. Let's take you now live to RAF at Kriteri in Cyprus, where the BBC's Jonathan Beale is standing by. Jonathan, you have the latest on the British involvement in these airstrikes.
Yes, in the early hours of this morning from this base, 4 RAF Tornado jets took off, all armed with each a Storm Shadow cruise missile, which is about 5 metres long. They wouldn't have had to fly very far to be in range of their targets here from Cyprus, and they would have stayed well out of Syrian airspace because those missiles have a range of about 300 miles. They fired those 4 Storm Shadow cruise missiles at a specific target 15 miles west of Homs. They believe that was a chemical weapons storage facility. The MOD saying that very careful analysis was to maximise the destruction of that facility and minimise the risk of contamination. And they believe it wasn't an area where civilians are. So those jets have come back. We don't know as to whether there was an attempt to shoot down any of those missiles. We believe there has been some Syrian surface-to-air activity, but they believe they've hit their target, and they believe, more importantly, that they have helped, along with the US and France, to degrade the Syrian regime's chemical weapons program.
Jonathan, where does this leave the British in terms of their involvement in operations in Syria?
Well, I think you have to divorce what they're doing in Syria and Iraq against so-called Islamic State, because they've been doing those bombing campaigns here from RAF at Kriteri for the last 3 years. This was very much an attack on the Syrian regime's chemical weapons program. I think it's probably going to be a one-off. I think what they hope, along with the US and France, this will achieve is that it will force Assad not to use chemical weapons again. Of course, if he does, then clearly this kind of military action is back on the table. But at the moment, this is seen as a one-off.
Jonathan Beale in Cyprus for now. Thank you very much. Well, this is a joint operation by the United States, France and the United Kingdom. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May issued this statement a few hours ago.
This evening, I have authorised British armed forces to conduct coordinated and targeted strikes to degrade the Syrian regime's chemical weapons capability and deter their use. We are acting together with our American and French allies. In Douma last Saturday, a chemical weapons attack killed up to 75 people, including young children, in circumstances of pure horror. The fact of this attack should surprise no one. The Syrian regime has a history of using chemical weapons against its own people in the most cruel and abhorrent way. And a significant body of information, including intelligence, indicates the Syrian regime is responsible for this latest attack. This persistent pattern of behaviour must be stopped, not just to protect innocent people in Syria from the horrific deaths and casualties caused by chemical weapons, but also because we cannot allow the erosion of the international norm that prevents the use of these weapons. We have sought to use every possible diplomatic channel to achieve this, but our efforts have been repeatedly thwarted. Even this week, the Russians vetoed a resolution at the UN Security Council which would have established an independent investigation into the Douma attack. So there is no practicable alternative to the use of force to degrade and deter the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian regime. This is not about intervening in a civil war. It is not about regime change. It is about a limited and targeted strike that does not further escalate tensions in the region and that does everything possible to prevent civilian casualties. And while this action is specifically about deterring the Syrian regime, it will also send a clear signal to anyone else who believes they can use chemical weapons with impunity. At this time, My thoughts are with our brave British servicemen and women and our French and American partners who are carrying out their duty with the greatest professionalism. The speed with which we are acting is essential in cooperating with our partners to alleviate further humanitarian suffering and to maintain the vital security of our operations. This is the first time as Prime Minister that I have had to take the decision to commit our armed forces in combat, and it is not a decision I have taken lightly. I have done so because I judge this action to be in Britain's national interest. We cannot allow the use of chemical weapons to become normalised within Syria, on the streets of the UK, or anywhere else in our world. We would have preferred an alternative path, but on this occasion there is none. History teaches us that the international community must defend the global rules and standards that keep us all safe. That is what our country has always done, and what we will continue to do.
Matt Cole is our political correspondent. He is in Downing Street for us with the latest. And this statement was released in the middle of the night UK time, wasn't it, as those airstrikes were taking place. The Prime Minister there at pains to point out that this was really a last resort option.
Yes, an exceptionally measured statement, I think we can say, from the Prime Minister. A little unusual. Normally we'd get these things in written form, but I think such as the gravity of the situation, the Prime Minister clearly committing this to camera as well. Around about 3 o'clock in this morning here in the UK that this was released. But I think Theresa May, mindful clearly that there is significant opposition in the UK to this action being taken without a vote in Parliament. The Labour Party opposition here, other more minor parties, the Liberal Democrats, the Scottish Nationalist Party too, would have a different view perhaps that Parliament should have had a say in this, but Theresa May has joined this action with the US, with France. The decision, I'm sure she would say, not taken lightly, but the Prime Minister very clear in her statement that while this is the first time she has sent British troops into a conflict like this, she feels, she says, that there was no other alternative. And I think if you listen through her statement as we just were, you see very measured points where she's trying to say there was no alternative. This is measured, it's considered. She's very much trying to suggest that this is not in any way trying to inflame the situation, very much something that she feels needs to be done to ensure that the normalisation of the use of chemical weapons is not allowed to happen by President Assad or anyone else in the world.
Matt, do you get the sense that as far as the British government's involvement is concerned, this will be it?
Well, at the moment, we can look to what we've heard from the United States, that this is a single strike, but Theresa May has, throughout this last week or so, spoken about working in coordination with friends and allies, and therefore I think if the friends and allies consider it to be the end of the matter, then perhaps they do. But I think many eyes now look to Russia. Theresa May did, in her statement, mention Russia specifically. She spoke of trying to exhaust all diplomatic channels before taking this action. She name-checked Russia by saying that it had vetoed attempts to take steps at the United Nations to have an independent investigation. So I think for now, this does appear to be it, but we now have to see what broader response as the sun comes up, not just here in Downing Street in the UK, but around the world, see what other reactions that there may be.
Matt, you referenced the line that she said that they had sought to use every possible diplomatic channel to avoid this scenario. Do we know what kind of diplomatic channel she's talking about? Will we get more details on that?
Well, I think it's very clear that there have been, as we've seen throughout the week, haven't we, ongoing efforts at the United Nations, some very heated exchanges between the British ambassador, the Russian ambassador, the US representative too, and I think that is the focus. We do understand there are backdoor channels between some of Britain's allies and Russia over the conflict in Syria to try and ensure that there's no sort of cross damage, if you like, between the different parties who are in that theatre of war. But while we believe some of those levels of communication have continued, what we don't know is the extent to which they will, well, continue now, because let's be honest, relations clearly are deteriorating beyond all sense between Russia and the UK at the moment. We have allegations flashing backwards and forwards. Russia claiming the attack in Duma was staged with the help of British Secret Service agents. The UK, the Prime Minister and others here rejecting that outright as nonsense. And so it's hard to see diplomatically how that can begin to unpick itself, particularly in the light of what's happened overnight. And so, as I say, we somewhat wait now to see what response there will be from Russia, not least because several of its spokespeople, its representative ambassadors, have spoken of the need for there to be consequences.
Matt, we're expecting to hear from Theresa May in a couple of hours' time. As you said, there are many politicians who will be showing some concern that Parliament wasn't recalled to discuss this. Is that going to be an issue for her?
I think so. On Monday, she will almost certainly give a statement to Parliament explaining her reasons. She'll face questions from Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party opposition here, and others. Not at least, I'm sure there'll be some in her own party who have, as the week went on this week, actually been questioning the need to do this, and certainly questioning the need to do this without a debate and a vote by Parliament. Now, here in the UK, there is no need for Theresa May in terms of the rules, if you like, for her to seek the approval of Parliament, but there has been a convention for this to happen. Remember, David Cameron in 2013 lost a vote about taking military action in Syria, and therefore it didn't go ahead. But I think Theresa May was under no illusion that she was facing calls, but has gone ahead anyway, saying, as we said in her statement, that she felt there was no alternative. But one has to remember, Theresa May does not have an overall majority in Parliament. She lost that at the last general election a year ago, and therefore some would say that undermines her position further for taking this action without consulting Parliament, and therefore I think those will be the nature of some of the questions she'll face on Monday, almost certainly.
OK, Matt Cole in Downing Street for now. Thank you.